something that has occupied my mind pretty consistently over the last couple of years has been where we find ourselves as a society and how we as Christians can actually fix it. Um, Obviously, as a natural part of finding out how we fix things, you end up trying to understand how we got to where we are as a society. And yeah, I mean, I'm only 23, so I've only been here in the 21st century. And I mean, dude, you can write off the first 18 years, if you can say that, right? Because no one's really at that age, you're kind of just trying to survive. And I've grown up, and I assume a lot of the guys watching this, we've grown up in a society where we were just getting told, um, masculinity is toxic, you should apologize for your existence. And then you just started seeing, we saw the rise of feminism, and then the rise of the woke left. And we saw it hit its peak, I think around 2020, 2021. And growing up, I always felt this sense of, this is nonsense. But I wasn't really like in the detail enough, and I grew up with feminist sisters, so I was like, they'd come up with all these arguments, like they could bring up stuff like gender pay gap, and I'm like, it sounds like nonsense, but I don't have any any stats on hand to kind of combat that. And growing up, I just kind of saw the rise of that, and obviously now looking back and knowing a lot of what we know about just society and just studying how things have come to be, you see how it has led us to this point. But growing up, I just always had this sense of like, this is nonsense. I disagree with this, but it seemed to be the popular position in society. And yeah, I don't know how else to explain it, but I'm very convinced that most men kind of agree with that. And we've kind of seen this shift, I guess, over the last couple of years, where there's been a combating of the woke. We're not scared of it anymore. But for me, something that really changed, kind of, moved the needle for me, was around 2021. I started getting onto self-improvement because, I mean, aside from like societal things and just watching society just become crazy, I didn't like my life. I was like, I do not like my life, and I want to change this. How can I actually go in? I know there's a better life out there for me. How can I get this? And I found self-improvement, and it was great. And started getting into like gym and like just trying to like know more and stuff. And I started listening to podcasts, and then I found myself Dr. Jordan Peterson, and oh my goodness, wow, like what a mind opener that was for me, because I was aware like there was kind of this political side to things. Like you always hear about politics growing up and stuff, but it was kind of just like that's not really of interest to you. But obviously when it's affecting your life as much as it did I was growing up, and again, I didn't find it in a way where I was like, this is nonsense, let me go out there and find the counter to all of this. It was just, hey, I want to improve my life. And obviously someone like Dr. Jordan Peterson, and I think there's a multitude of factors that led to him kind of blowing up. I mean, he's incredibly intelligent. But I think the big thing was kind of that around 2016, that time, that, Me Too just hit the peak, like feminism hit its peak woke. You got someone like Jordan Peterson who not only like knew his stuff, but he was courageous enough to actually stand up to it. Because what you found was there was a lot of people that were kind of just, they didn't care too much to fight the culture war. And I think that's how we kind of got to this place. I mentioned early on in the video, you don't really care too much about like how we got to this place until you're trying to figure out how we fix this. And the big thing was just conservatives kind of just sat back, just studying, and obviously studying mainly like American politics, because that influences, I guess, the rest of the West. That's what kind of led us to where we were at. I mean, you kind of just saw the way, woke just kind of started creeping in, early 2000s, or not early 2000s, early 2010s, and obviously like feminism and just cancel culture and all this stuff, and it just kept creeping and taking, right? Until it became this monster that was just wow. And the reason we got to that place was that conservatives just weren't there. And more particularly, I'm interested obviously from a Christian perspective, and I mean, as a Christian, my Christian informs my politics, and this is less about politics and more about Christian, because that's what matters, right? How us as young men and just men in general can fix this, because this world is going to hell, as we just look around at society. But yeah, that was kind of what led us to where we're at now. You had a lot of, and you still see the same problem now, and it's infuriating. You just see a lot of Christians just sat back, refusing to be courageous enough to partake in the culture. And I mean, when you read the Bible, you see the opposite, man. I mean, think about our Lord and Savior Jesus, man. Like he he got killed because he was in those political debates. I mean, he's sitting there and the Pharisees are asking him about, who should we pay taxes to? What do you think about adultery? Like all this stuff. He's getting asked these impossible questions. Obviously, he's Jesus. It's a bit of a different perspective, but the Bible doesn't call us to stay out of the culture, right? It calls us to be in there and be the light, right? You need to be a light in the darkness. Now, if you're a light, what does Jesus say? A city that is on a hill cannot be hidden, right? We kind of just descended from the hill and we just decided to not partake in the culture at all. And I mean, I spoke about Jesus, but I mean, look at Paul, man. Look at John. John the Baptist got beheaded for calling out Herod, and that, yeah, just incestuous. I know it's technically not incestuous, but technically is. That incestuous relationship he had with his brother's wife and everything, right? He got killed for that. I mean, look at Daniel in the Old Testament. And I don't need to talk to you about the kings and everything, right? But like, they were in the culture. They were in the culture and getting involved. And we don't want to get our hands dirty because, I mean, as Christians, we're very comfortable, right? I mean, save kind of what you see in the Middle East and, say your Chinas and all that stuff, where as a Christian you can get beheaded for being Christian. A lot of us Christians nowadays, the worst that can happen is people just, I guess they think we're idiots or whatever it is. That's a far cry from, I don't even need to go back to what's happening in the Bible. I can go look at like Christians in Muslim countries, Christians in China and in North Korea and Japan, maybe less so Japan, but in persecuted countries, like people losing their lives for this. I mean, I don't need to talk to you about Charlie Kirk. I mean, that's why someone like him was so inspirational. You can say that because he's doing the equivalent of what we don't want to do, right? We don't want to get our hands dirty in the fight against evil. Now, personally, I would not want to do what he was doing. I mean, he got murdered for, just fighting evil, like getting in there, getting in the mess, right? And fighting it from a mostly Christian perspective. And he lost his life for that. But save like the losing your life for it. Like, look at the cost that it just has on your life. I mean, being misunderstood, being clipped up, and being called like all these things that you're just not. Like, I mean, as Christians, we're kind of getting used to it, right? Like, I think that the labels, the misogynist, transphobic, yada yada yada. We don't care too much about that. Like in our small circles, like they've overused the labels. The left have simply overused the labels to a point where it has no effect. Like, I mean, calling Trump a fascist, like, you don't know what a fascist is, right? But anyways, like, risking that, like, that's your reputation. Like, people hate you, you get murdered, and then people make fun of you after you're murdered and stuff. That's just kind of what happens when you, like, fight this fight. And no one wants that ministry, right? And I wouldn't call it specifically a ministry because it was more a political organization, but still getting in the fight, right? Like, you're still getting in the fight and fighting for Christian biblical values, right? And that's obviously an extreme version of it, but that is what I see is kind of led to us being where we're at now. We don't want to get our hands dirty. We don't want to get involved. We don't want to do that Ephesians 2 verse 10 where, we were given these gifts for specific purposes and we want to go out there and use them because it's uncomfortable. Some people might say mean words about us. And I think, the reason for it is obviously we don't look at eternity the way we should, right? I mean, we value these 70, 80 years we get on here if we're lucky, as the be all and end all. And I mean, you can understand. I mean, again, I'm 23, like 23 years is all I've known on this planet. So your 70, 80 years is like, again, it's going to be all you know until you die. But eternity in comparison to 80 years is nothing. I cannot explain how much closer to nothing it is. I just can't, like, it's nothing in comparison to eternity. When you look at eternity, when you look at that well done, good and faithful servant, all of a sudden, the scope changes in terms of what we're meant to do on this planet. Now you're not afraid of death, death for the purpose of Christ. I mean, Paul says to live as Christ and to die as gain. We don't look at it that way. We live in this hedonistic society and we want to partake in it. Right? We love it. I mean, we love scrolling on these phones. We love living our best lives. We love this individualistic culture, and that obviously takes away from why would I want to go out there and speak out against evil. And that's how we find ourselves where we're at in this place, right? And the church massively to blame for it, because ultimately from a Christian perspective, we're supposed to shape the culture. Now it's very interesting looking back at history. Over 2,000 years of history. Obviously more like recent history is what we're interested in, and the world has changed incredibly fast over the last 30 years. I'd say because of technology, and the pill as well. It's very interesting, like what the pill did in 1960, like that was very much like a fourth revolution if you look at the impact it had on society. the world changes really fast. It has been changing really fast. Um, but it's our job as the church to shape the culture, to respond to changes in culture, and to be the light, be the light on a hill. And we've just failed to do that because of just pure cowardice. I'd say cowardice and just laziness. Like, you don't want to get involved in that fight because we're becoming like the world. And we forget that concept of being in this world but not of this world. And we're just becoming a lot more of this world. And forget, we talk about like all the lukewarm Christians you have around on the planet and everything. Apart from all of that, Christians in the church, we're very comfortable in our, I like to call it our holy huddles, And I see the appeal. I very much love it. I love sitting around, with people that think like me. Christian, like, I don't want to be sitting here arguing with you, trying to convince you why God exists when it's like very clear. I don't want to be sitting here arguing with you about why, like political stuff, like abortions and all that. I don't want to be doing that because it's tedious. I want to be sitting with guys who think just like me and we discuss like more interesting stuff, But ultimately, that's not what we're called on this planet to do. We're called on this planet to love the people, love our enemies, love the people of this planet, right? And if you love somebody, you're not going to want to see them go to hell. And we should be willing to go out there and actually do what we're called to do, right? Which is, get in that culture in whatever aspect that looks like. We don't all have to go do like a Charlie Kirk thing or whatever it is. But we need to get in the fight. We really need to get in the fight. Now, going back to kind of the theme of this, or the main concept of this video, I really started to understand over the last year the importance of what is called a king's table. And I'll get to explaining what a king's table is just now. But again, if you look at how we fix, we've kind of analyzed how we've got in here, but how do we fix things? How do we fix where society is right now? And I mean, the ultimate thing is discipleship. When you look at churches that are strong versus churches that are just I wouldn't say crumbling, because crumbling would assume that they're dying and everything. And sure, that is a characteristic of churches that are dying, but even churches that are spiritually dead. So you get your churches that are mega churches, they grow and everything, but it's just full of lukewarm Christians, and there's no real kingdom work. I don't want to say no kingdom work being done, because sure, there's definitely real Christians that are in there. But when you look at generally a strong church that is making a difference and living out what Christ is calling us to do versus a church that isn't, for me, what I see as a big factor between those two churches is discipleship. And now we've got to get into discussing what this topic of discipleship is, because there's so many definitions you can have for it. And I think we also, because of the more you get into this, there starts to be a convoluted idea of what discipleship is, community, yada yada, and we start getting lost in semantics. So I'm just going to clearly define what I mean by discipleship, right? So for me, I've kind of seen, I'd say that three pillars, and you can kind of extend this. Like I said, you can get so deep into all of this stuff, right? But you can kind of for me, I can kind of see three distinct versions of fellowship / community, or whatever you want to call it, right? Which is our relationships with people. Right, so for me, the first thing is kind of just your general church attendance. Going to church every week, listening to the word. You've got your pastor explaining stuff to you and whatever, and you're just sitting in the congregation with the church. Right, I'd say fellowship. I'd say I'd call that fellowship, or your general community, where you're just coming in on a Sunday and you're just listening to the word and everything, and then you kind of got your second layer. Right, this would be, I'd say that's community. That's your Bible studies, your men's group, whatever it is, where it's kind of just you're meeting outside of church. You're meeting in a space where you guys as Christians can just fellowship, whether it's over Bible study or you are just, I don't know, not a life group. You're doing some kind of activity or whatever it is, but it's a more concentrated a version of what you had on a Sunday, where it's cool, on Sunday I'm coming in, I'm seeing people, I'm seeing Christians, having, a hi, how are you conversation kind of here and there. But what you're having in terms of finding friends, that's more your second layer of community, right? And then there's that third layer, which I think is the most important, if I could say, in relation to, how on fire for God you are. I believe God definitely uses that as a massive tool for sanctification, and also for just getting you on fire. And it's I call it the King's Table. You can take a version of a life group, but basically it's this idea of, so let's go back to where the King's Table comes from, right? And it's David had himself a King's Table, and it was made up of three guys. It was Jonathan, that was kind of like that was his best friend. Like it was, yeah. Go read in the Bible, like some stuff happens in there. You're just like, well, these guys are really close. But yeah, that's kind of like your best friend. Matt Chandler describes it as your lover of your soul. Then you have a Joab, right? That's your guy who's like, hey, which hill are we taking today? You know, like, oh, you guys want to go out for war? Like, yeah, what are we doing? Like, let's do it. Like, they're just down for anything, right? That's your Joab. Then there's a Nathan, who's kind of the older, like your prophet. He was a prophet. He's kind of your older guy who kind of gives you advice, right? Nathan is the guy who would have who called out David after he cheated or he committed adultery with Bathsheba. You know, Nathan was the one to go and call him out, right? Like it's like you see the function of a perfect king's table, if you're gonna call it that. It's your best friend who you can go to for anything. Then there's the guy who's just ready to just get after it. You know, the guy who's like motivating and everything. Then there's the guy who's there to correct you. Now I haven't so much gotten too much into the nitty gritties of that because I feel like that's more like on a personal side where you kind of get people like that. When I speak more of like that deep discipleship aspect, I think more from a perspective of, I mean, Jesus as well had it. You know, you'd have the crowds that would kind of be like your church. Then you'd have the 12, so the disciples, that would kind of be like your community, your Bible study, yada yada yada. Then you have the three, you know, Peter, James, and John. Those were like the inner circle of the inner circle, right? Those are the people you're doing life with. Now, taken apart from Jesus now, because obviously, I mean, Jesus is Jesus, you know. For me, the concept of this life group is, hey, I've got 3 to 4 men who I'm doing life with. And I remember Matt Chandler describing this, where he was saying his guys, they know, you know, when his wife is out of town. They know what kind of impulses he has. They know when his kids are annoying him. Just stuff like that, right? And he prefaced this, or I kind of tie it in together, from a part when he said, and you're speaking particularly to the men in relation to this, you're saying being 99% known is the same as being completely unknown. Now, the concept behind that is just, I mean, as people, we don't really like sharing every part of ourselves, right? And I mean, as Christians, and it's always so interesting seeing science catch up to the Bible, but you can see scientific evidence for this as well. You know, this concept of, I mean, think about therapy, like the whole concept of therapy, right? It's going out there and being like, cool, the therapist is like digging really deep into who you are. They're asking you difficult questions, and that's a place where you've got one-to-one connection where you get to just share everything. This person is actually able, it's somebody who's got all the context of your situation, that is able to step out, you know, off that situation, but is able to look in and actually give you a different perspective, right? A clearer perspective, if you can say. Again, we got to take it back to the Bible, and it also starts with our relationship with God, right? It's so futile. It's so futile for us to have this kind of relationship with God where we hold things back, because I mean, He's God. He knows everything, right? But again, it's not really for God. You know, it's not like, oh God, yeah, I'm struggling with this really secret sin. I'm not going to tell you about it because I'm scared. You know, you're gonna be disappointed or whatever. Like, He knows, right? But you being open enough to tell Him that, right, it does work for you, right? I don't understand how it all fully works, but I'm pretty certain, like, you know, God knows everything, right? And it's just the importance of that, just as a grounding structure, right? For us to pray real prayers. It was another concept I learned really well last year. I'll say this year, because I'm recording this like literally just before the new year. But this concept of praying real prayers, it was like, cool, what's the purpose of prayer, right? It's to build a relationship with God, right? And I mean, God already knows everything anyways, right? But again, if there's things you're holding on to, like, bring it to Him, you know, bring it to Him so He can actually like see not that He can see the full extent of it, He can see it. You'd be surprised when you pray real prayers, right? And it was kind of this concept I heard getting from Matt Chandler, and also kind of just learned it throughout the year as well, of like, you're not doing God any favors by like withholding things from Him. He already knows. And I mean, God not answering a prayer, right? Like, let's be real about this stuff, right? Because there are things we want, and God will say no, and it will hurt us. Now, we understand this concept of like, you know, God, it's your will and all that stuff, but like, you do nobody any favors when God says no. You're angry at Him, like you're fuming at Him, but you didn't really say anything about it. You're like, you know, God, your will be done. Yada yada. You're not doing anyone any favors, right? But when you go to Him and you're able to be like, hey God, like, I'm really like disappointed, and you're able to share like the full extent that there's a much more intimate relationship that's there than, oh no, I'm just going to ignore this and kind of sweep it under the rug, right? Because now you start harboring this this resentment in your heart that keeps you further away from God. Because I mean, how would you want to go to somebody you don't really, you don't really like them? You know, you're angry at them, but you're forced to be nice to them, if you can say that. And it's, so that's a whole interesting concept. But that's kind of the building block of this, right? This thing of like being 99% known is the same as being completely unknown. Now, it's all well and good us having God to speak about this, but again, God also gave us community as a function of helping us in our journey, because this is tough. I mean, I love Ecclesiastes 4 verse 9 to 12. You know, two are better than one. A threefold cord is not quickly broken. You know, two are better than one, because you know, if one is laying on, I'm absolutely butchering this paraphrasing, by the way. Two are better than one, because if one lays down in the cold of night, who's there to keep them warm? But if there's another, they can keep each other warm, right? And it's just this whole concept. It's just weaved throughout. I mean, even in the concept of the Trinity in itself, right? It's a community, and we're made for community. And the fundamental part of all of this is that we're supposed to have 3-4 guys that we're doing battle with, because this is battle. Going back to kind of what I've been speaking about, is that we kind of living passively through life. And I mean, as a church, we've done this over the last, I don't know how many years, like I'd say the last last century, and see how society has just unfolded. And now we're kind of catching the wake up call, because it's like, hey, this is not looking good. When, you know, society starts coming for your children, and yeah, they're just trying to push all these things on you that are like, hey, this is okay, now it's actually starting to affect me, let me do something about it. It's like, we cannot keep living passively, right? I'm thinking of, I need to remember the verse reference, but when Paul speaks about how we battle not against flesh and blood, but against powers and principalities, right? Or the whole concept of putting on the full armor of God, right? You don't put on the full armor of God every day to just stand there in the battlefield. Like, you're in the battlefield, you've got on the full armor of God. Now do something with it. Go out there and fight, right? Like, that's what we're meant to do. We're meant to fight, get up and fight every day, right? So every day is battle, battle for souls. And I think that's one of the first things we need to start understanding. Like, it's all well and good, we're kind of speaking about it now, and it's like, every day is a battle. But like, if we don't have that like galvanizing us and moving us every single day, then I mean, it doesn't really matter, right? But yeah, it's kind of that concept of like, we're going through battle, and we need other guys to do battle with. And it goes back to this concept of a king's table, right? We need other guys to do battle with, and it's important for us to have that. And it's so interesting seeing how God works, because I never thought about this concept of a king's table like 4 years ago. I wasn't a lukewarm Christian, but I was very much in that. I know Matt Chandler likes to call it this concept of like God like trying to compete. God's not trying to compete for a position on your priority list. You know, he's not trying to be like, hey, you know, I want to be number 1, but you know, I'll settle for 2 today, I'll settle for 3. He's not trying to be that. Right? He's not even trying to be number 1. He's trying to be the piece of paper that your priorities are written on, right? He's trying to be your whole life, you know, the center on which your life is built on, right? And I think for me, until last year, so until like 2024, he was very much like competing. Like, he was very much competing for that number 1 position, but he was never the center of my life. And that obviously changed last year. And it's interesting, like, he changed last year when I started finding some Christian community and just being engulfed in it. And I think it's just the way we're built as humans, and also as men. Like, you know, we're not an island, right? And there's just this thing that happens when we have 2 or 3 other guys that just, you know, you're like, hey, let's get after it. And I remember thinking about this in 2021, because I had this concept of like, hey, like, we're struggling as men, how do we fix this? And it became apparent to me very quickly, we need other guys to do life with. And I always thought of this idea of like, okay, if I'm struggling to like do the good habits, if I'm struggling, and this was, you know, on self-improvement, I'm struggling to do the good habits, I'm struggling to go to gym and all that stuff, right? How much less would I be struggling if there was like a house, and we kind of, and it's just like 4 or 5 other guys, and we're sharing the house, you know, and it's like we've decided, hey, we're gonna gym together, we're gonna do these things together. I think it'll be a lot less difficult for me to wake up in the morning when I know like I've got 4 other guys up there that are also getting up. You know, I'd be like, hey, I don't want to be the only one that's not going. And there's just this thing of like this camaraderie that's built, and we need it as men, right? And it's beautiful seeing how that's kind of evolved, and now into this concept of, again, I understand now the concept of a king's table. But yeah, I think I've kind of gotten the point across, right? Like, it's important for us to have that, because not only does it kind of it's incredible how much work it does for us. I mean, it's weaved there throughout the entire Bible why we need it. Um, but just thinking about if you're struggling, like in terms of just, dude, I don't know where my life is going. And I'm really struggling with this thing. I'm struggling with like just living like a shell of myself. I think the single best thing we can do for ourselves, the single best thing we can do for our relationship with God, the single best thing we can do for us really moving towards our purpose, right, is finding that king's table, really prioritizing that, finding brothers we're going through life with. It's just this thing that happens when guys get together and we're like, hey, I'm doing this thing. And it's like, hey, that's so sick. Like, that's motivating. I want to do this thing as well. I think there's just something so different that we have there. I don't say potent. There's just a lot of energy that you get just from being in arm in arm, going to battle together versus, just waking up every day feeling like you're kind of drudging through life. But yeah, that's kind of all I had, and I'd love to get your guys' comments on this whole concept of a king's table. But until next time, see you boys.